Australia has a marketing problem, not the kind that embarrasses anyone, the kind that quietly gets people hurt. The pitch is elegant. Friendly beaches, open roads, benign wildlife for Instagram, zero genuine danger unless you go actively looking for trouble. What that pitch leaves out is the part where the air in one city has been documented poisoning children's blood for decades, or where a swim on a tourist beach in late October kills you in minutes from an animal most visitors don't even know exists, or where government data shows assault rates that in any European country would trigger formal international travel advisories. We built this ranking differently, not just crime statistics, though we use those extensively. Climate risk assessments, environmental contamination reports, disease surveillance records, air quality monitoring data, and the kind of local knowledge that never makes it into the tourism brochure. 10 cities where danger is not one isolated thing. It compounds, it layers, and it is often completely invisible. Number 10 will reset your assumptions about tourist cities. Number 1 will redefine what danger actually means.
Number 10. Cairns, Queensland. Here's what the tourism industry spends millions of dollars ensuring you don't think about when you book your Great Barrier Reef trip. From October to May, which is conveniently peak tourist season, the waters around Cairns contain box jellyfish. Not the mildly unpleasant kind. Chironex fleckeri, the most venomous marine creature on Earth. Its tentacles carry enough venom to send an adult human into cardiac arrest within 2 to 5 minutes of significant contact. The Irukandji jellyfish, smaller than a thumbnail, nearly transparent in the water, causes Irukandji syndrome, excruciating full body pain, hypertension, catastrophic blood pressure spikes, and a documented sense of impending doom so specific and consistent that doctors use it as a formal diagnostic criterion. People have died from it in these waters, not occasionally, repeatedly, over decades. The beaches directly adjacent to the Cairns city center are netted during stinger season, but the nets are not foolproof, they don't extend to most of the surrounding coastline, and tourists who hire boats for reef excursions are regularly in open, unprotected water during the most dangerous months. Locals understand the risk intuitively. The signage is there for those who read it, but visitors from inland Australia and overseas consistently underestimate it because the water looks precisely like paradise. Then there are the crocodiles. Saltwater crocodiles, the largest reptilian predators on Earth, documented at over 6 meters, are not some abstract outback problem in Cairns. They inhabit waterways within the urban boundary. The Mulgrave River, Barron River, and Trinity Inlet are all active crocodile habitat under ongoing Queensland Parks and Wildlife Management. In 2022, a crocodile was located in a suburban drain less than 2 kilometers from the city center. Regular crocodile capture operations within the Cairns urban area are not extraordinary events. They are scheduled operational requirements. This has been normalized to the point where it barely generates local news coverage.
Property crime rounds out the picture in ways that specifically target visitors. Cairns records property offence rates significantly above the Queensland average, and the mechanism is specific. Tourist naivety about which areas are safe creates perfect targeting opportunities. Queensland Police have issued repeated formal advisories about vehicle break-ins at rainforest trailheads, rental cars with bags visible through windows, backpackers in shared accommodation. The crime is not random. It follows the tourist calendar with precision that reflects genuine local knowledge about victim patterns. Cairns is beautiful. The reef is real. The rainforest is extraordinary. The city is also a place where the water contains creatures that can stop your heart, where crocodiles require active urban management, and where the tourism industry has a structural financial interest in ensuring you focus on the first sentence of this paragraph rather than the rest of it. Number 9. Broome, Western Australia. Most Australian cities have one dominant environmental hazard that residents manage and visitors are warned about. Broome has a calendar problem. There is no month where nothing is actively trying to cause serious harm. From November to April, Broome sits squarely in cyclone season. The Kimberley coast has a well-documented history of significant tropical cyclone impacts. The town's geographic exposure is structural. Its position on the northwest coast puts it directly in the path of weather systems that can sustain wind speeds exceeding 200 kilometres per hour. Unlike Cairns or Townsville, which have substantial infrastructure built to modern cyclone codes across much of the urban area, significant portions of Broome's housing stock dates from the Pearling era or early post-war construction. The resilience gap is real. From October to May, the same waters that make Cable Beach one of Australia's most reproduced tourism images fill with box jellyfish and irukandji. The stinger risk at Broome is systematically underreported relative to Cairns, partly because Broome's tourism industry operates at a smaller scale, and partly because Cable Beach is so visually spectacular that hazard warnings feel fundamentally incongruous with the product being sold. The water looks like a screensaver. The risk is real and has resulted in documented medical emergencies in the region. Year round, and this is the part that genuinely surprises visitors, the waterways, mangroves, and coastal areas around Broome support a substantial saltwater crocodile population. Fatal crocodile attacks have occurred in the Broome region. The distances involved are not abstract. Cable Beach itself sits immediately adjacent to mangrove systems through which crocodiles move as part of normal tidal activity. Parks and Wildlife conducts ongoing trapping operations in the Broome area. Locals understand that the risk does not announce itself with visible warning signs. The crocodile you don't see is the one that matters. The medical infrastructure reality is what elevates Broome's position on this list beyond its individual hazards. Broome is approximately 2,200 kilometres from Perth by road. Serious medical emergencies requiring trauma surgery, envenomation treatment, or cardiac intervention require Royal Flying Doctor Service evacuation or a commercial flight. The time between an acute incident and specialist treatment is fundamentally different from what it is in a city with a trauma hospital 20 minutes away. Every hazard on this list is more dangerous in a location where the medical response is hours removed. Broome's isolation is not incidental. It is the force multiplier for everything else. Number 8. Townsville, Queensland. This entry begins with something that appears in neither crime statistics nor Weather Bureau warnings. Ross River fever is a mosquito-borne disease caused by the Ross River virus, endemic to Queensland and the Northern Territory. It produces fever, rash, and joint inflammation so severe that patients consistently describe it as feeling like their bones are fracturing from the inside. There is no vaccine. There is no antiviral treatment. The joint pain can persist for months. Documented cases have extended beyond a year from initial infection, and the Townsville region consistently records among the highest notification rates for Ross River fever in Australia. In active outbreak years, hundreds of confirmed cases are recorded in the broader North Queensland area. The environmental conditions that create outbreaks, sustained warmth, flooding rains generating standing water, high mosquito density, are conditions that North Queensland delivers predictably and repeatedly. This is not a risk that can be avoided through behavioural choices in the way that crime or crocodiles can be managed. The mosquitoes are ambient. They come to you. Barmah forest virus, a related mosquito-borne pathogen producing similar clinical presentation, also circulates in the region. The disease burden from vector-borne illness in Townsville is a public health reality that receives almost no coverage in content about the city. The crime data is well documented and serious. Vehicle theft, specifically organised teenage car theft, became so pervasive in Townsville that it generated national media coverage over multiple years and formal parliamentary inquiries into the juvenile justice response. Property crime broadly is elevated substantially above Queensland state averages. Assault rates are concerning. The socioeconomic geography of Townsville is stark. Specific suburbs with concentrated disadvantage generate the majority of the crime data, while other parts of the city are genuinely safe and livable. The distinction matters, but only to people who have the local knowledge to act on it. The cyclone exposure is real. Cyclone Yasi in 2011, one of the most powerful tropical systems to make landfall in recorded Australian history, passed close enough to Townsville to generate significant impact. The structural cyclone risk for the region is ongoing and documented in emergency management planning. What makes Townsville's position on this list specifically notable is the combination of three entirely separate threat categories: documented disease burden, elevated crime, and cyclone exposure, operating simultaneously and largely independently of each other. Number 7. Port Hedland, Western Australia. Stop. Before we discuss crocodiles or crime or cyclones, we need to talk about the air. Port Hedland is Australia's largest bulk export port by tonnage. The scale of the operation, so the crushing, stockpiling, transport and loading of iron ore and other materials, produces particulate matter that disperses into the environment of the town that exists directly adjacent to it. Iron ore dust, salt dust, and fine particulates. The Western Australian Environmental Protection Authority has monitored Port Hedland's air quality extensively. The results, available in government monitoring reports, show that fine particulate levels, the categories specifically associated with respiratory disease, cardiovascular impact, and long term health effects, and regularly exceed national ambient air quality standards. This is documented, it is public record. It is substantially underreported in general Australian media coverage of the town. The specific composition of Port Hedland's particulate exposure has prompted research into blood lead levels in the local population, given the mineral composition of the ore being processed and the pathways through which environmental particulate enters the body. This monitoring has been an ongoing public health consideration in the region. The climate is extreme in ways that are separate from the pollution question. Summer maximum temperatures regularly reach 45 degrees Celsius. Port Hedland sits in one of the most active cyclone corridors on the western Australian coast. Cyclone Rosita caused severe damage to the town in 2000. The structural cyclone risk is among the highest in Western Australia. The workforce is predominantly FIFO. Fly-in, fly-out workers rotating through resource extraction operation day yin, which creates specific social dynamics. High wages, alcohol access, social isolation, limited permanent community infrastructure. Crime rates in FIFO, Chudlifo-dominated resource towns follow documented patterns in Australian criminological research. Port Hedland fits those patterns. People live there because the wages are extraordinary. The economic logic is real. The question, how does the calculation change when the air quality monitoring data is included in the analysis, is one that the people making those decisions deserve to have access to. Number 6, Darwin, Northern Territory. Let's do this differently. Just the facts. In order. Darwin is the only Australian capital city where saltwater crocodiles inhabit the harbour. Darwin Harbour has documented managed crocodile populations. NT Parks and Wildlife conducts regular crocodile capture operations in the harbour and adjacent waterways. Swimming in Darwin Harbour is actively discouraged by wildlife authorities. People do it anyway, particularly tourists who have not absorbed the local understanding that this is serious. Darwin has the highest assault rate of any Australian capital city. Not marginally higher, but significantly elevated above both the national capital city average and the broader Queensland and New South Wales comparators. The Mitchell Street Entertainment Precinct on Friday and Saturday nights generates violence statistics that are, in the language of criminological assessment, concerning at a level that would prompt formal response in most other capital cities. From November to May, Darwin's coastal waters contain box jellyfish and irukandji. Stinger nets are installed at designated swimming beaches. They provide partial protection in defined areas. They do not cover all accessible water and are not impermeable barriers. Darwin has been directly struck by tropical cyclones. Cyclone Tracy destroyed the city on Christmas Day 1974, killing 66 people, the deadliest cyclone in Australian recorded history at the time. The rebuilt city occupies the same geographic position in the same cyclone exposure zone. Multiple significant tropical systems have affected the Darwin region since Tracy. Darwin's average maximum temperature in October is 34 degrees Celsius. The humidity that accompanies the wet season creates heat stress conditions that make that number physiologically substantially more demanding than it sounds. The combination of heat and humidity produces a wet bulb temperature, the measure of what the human body actually experiences, that exceeds comfortable working thresholds regularly. And finally, 147,000 people separated from the next significant population centre by more than 1,500 kilometres of largely empty highway. Darwin doesn't rank higher because it has the infrastructure to manage these hazards better than what comes next. The hazards are real and layered. The response capacity is meaningfully better than the cities that follow. Number 5, Mackay, Queensland. There is a map that tropical cyclone researchers use when illustrating which section of the Australian coast has absorbed the most concentrated pattern of significant cyclone impacts across the recorded history of weather observation. The stretch of Queensland coast centred on Mackay appears on that map with a frequency that makes it, by any actuarial or emergency management assessment, one of the highest risk cyclone exposure zones in the country. Of the 77 tropical cyclones documented in Bureau of Meteorology records for Queensland, 19 have crossed or approached the coast within 75 kilometres of Mackay, a concentration that emergency planners formally classify as extraordinary exposure for a city of this size. Cyclone Ada in 1970 devastated the Whitsunday Islands and the coastline between Bowen and Mackay. generating catastrophic river flooding through the Pioneer and Don rivers that turned inland streets into waterways. Cyclone Uluwi made landfall near the Whitsunday coast in 2010 as a Category 3 system with sustained wind speeds that caused major structural damage across the entire region. The historical record of cyclone impacts on this coastline is not a collection of near misses or glancing blows. It is a record of repeated significant events with documented destruction and mortality across generations. The infrastructure of Mackay has been rebuilt and upgraded in response. The geographic exposure has not changed. The stinger season, box jellyfish, and irukandji applies fully to the Mackay coastline, as it does to all accessible coastal Queensland north of approximately Agnes Water. Beaches are closed and netted during peak season. The risk cannot be eliminated through netting alone, and the pattern of serious envenomation incidents in North Queensland waters over the past 3 decades demonstrates that the warnings do not prevent all contact. Crime rates in Mackay are elevated above Queensland state averages across both property and violent offence categories. The mining and resource industry presence, the Bowen Basin coalfields and associated processing operations creates the social dynamics that resource extraction economies consistently produce: high wages, transient populations, alcohol, limited community infrastructure for FIFO workers. The reason Mackay sits at 5 rather than lower on this list is the cyclone concentration specifically. The environmental threat profile, direct, documented, repeated, and with an historical record that points toward future events rather than past anomalies, is disproportionate even by North Queensland coastal standards. Number 4, Katherine, Northern Territory. On the 27th of January 1998, the Katherine River peaked at 20.4 metres at the railway bridge, surpassing every flood record in the town's history. The entire town was inundated. Approximately 5,000 residents were evacuated. The Katherine District Hospital, the primary medical facility serving a region geographically larger than many countries, was destroyed. Contamination of the town water supply followed immediately. Entire residential neighbourhoods ceased to exist in any functional sense. The recovery took years. The cost, in economic and human terms, was severe. That was not a one-in-a-century event. The Katherine River has flooded severely multiple times since 1998. As recently as 2026, the river peaked at 19.2 metres and the hospital was again evacuated with patients airlifted to Darwin. The town is situated at a geographic and hydrological point that makes catastrophic flooding a structural feature of its existence. Katherine floods. This is known. Emergency management planning incorporates it. Residents understand it, and every few years, the river demonstrates it again. The crime statistics for Katherine are extreme. Assault rates are among the highest recorded anywhere in Australia. Katherine occupies a position on the Stuart Highway between Darwin and Alice Springs, and the social dynamics that produce serious crime in both of those cities concentrate in Katherine without the mitigating advantages of Darwin's infrastructure or Alice Springs' relative size and service level. Saltwater crocodiles inhabit the Katherine River and connected waterways after major flood events, when the river spreads across areas that are normally dry ground, residential streets, and infrastructure. Crocodile management operations have been required in locations that no one considers crocodile territory under normal conditions. The flood and the crocodiles are not separate problems with separate management frameworks. They intersect in ways that require a specific kind of post-event response. What Katherine represents on this list is the compounding effect. Each hazard is real. Each exists in other cities on this list. The combination of catastrophic flood exposure, extreme crime rates, crocodile presence in disaster-affected areas, the destruction of medical infrastructure in the most severe flood events, and profound isolation from backup services creates a risk profile that exceeds the sum of its individual components. Number 3, Alice Springs, Northern Territory. The most honest thing to say about Alice Springs is something that tourism operators have been unable to resolve for 2 decades. It is one of the most beautiful places in Australia. The West McDonnell Ranges at sunrise, Simpsons Gap at midday, the desert light in the hour before dark, the scale of the landscape and the quality of the silence at 3 in the morning with no artificial illumination for 100 kilometres in any direction. There is genuinely no other place in the country that looks and feels like this. The crime statistics are extreme by any Australian measure. The overall offence rate places Alice Springs among the highest in the country when calculated per capita. Assault rates are documented at 4 to 5 times higher than typical Australian cities. Property crime is so pervasive that many residents have ceased reporting incidents to police, not because they've given up on the concept of law and order, but because the practical experience of reporting generates no meaningful response, and the pattern continues regardless of whether individual incidents are recorded. This is not an allegation. It is documented in submissions to Federal and Northern Territory parliamentary inquiries made by Alice Springs residents in their own words on the public record. Public disorder is visible and persistent in the town centre in ways that genuinely surprise visitors who arrive expecting a straightforward outback tourism experience. The reasons, and they are real, complex, and deeply rooted in the specific history of this region, include intergenerational disadvantage, inadequate housing, alcohol access, the failure of multiple waves of government policy intervention, and the consequences of decisions made over more than a century of colonial administration that were not designed with the communities they governed in mind. The heat is genuinely dangerous. Summer temperatures regularly reach 44 to 45 degrees Celsius. Heat-related illness and death in remote central Australia is a documented public health reality. The nearest major hospital with full specialist surgical services is in Darwin, lies 1,500 kilometres to the north on a highway that is not always traversable after severe weather events. A medical evacuation from Alice Springs for a time-sensitive emergency is not a fast process under any circumstances. The situation in Alice Springs has been the subject of federal emergency responses, parliamentary inquiries, ministerial task forces, and sustained national media coverage across multiple decades. The problems are not unknown, undiscussed, or unexamined. What has not followed is resolution. Number 2, Tennant Creek, Northern Territory, a town of 3,000 people, the highest assault rate recorded in Australia, by a margin that is not close. When criminologists apply the standard methodology of calculating offences per 100,000 population to normalise for city size, Tennant Creek produces numbers that are difficult to place in context against any other Australian location. The gap between Tennant Creek and the next most violent location on this list is not marginal statistical noise. It is substantial, consistent, documented differential that has appeared in Australian Institute of Criminology data, Northern Territory Police statistics, and federal parliamentary submissions repeatedly over time. The violence is not disputed. What deserves to be understood by anyone who encounters this data is the explanatory context that statistics alone cannot provide. Tennant Creek sits at the geographic midpoint of the Stuart Highway between Darwin and Alice Springs. The nearest hospital with emergency surgical capacity is in Katherine, 3 hours to the north under good conditions. The isolation is not a rhetorical device. It is a medical reality with direct consequences for outcomes when serious incidents occur, because the time between an acute trauma event and specialist treatment is fundamentally different in this location than in any Australian city with hospital infrastructure nearby. Alcohol has been identified as a primary contributing factor in Northern Territory Police reports and health department submissions consistently across years of documentation. Various restriction regimes have been implemented. Specific measurable indicators have responded to specific interventions. The underlying social conditions that drive consumption and the violence associated with it have not changed at the same rate or in the same direction. The Barkly region surrounding Tennant Creek is documented as one of the most economically disadvantaged regions in Australia. Employment outside government services and remote station work is limited. The economic base is thin in ways that have direct consequences for daily social conditions. At 45 degrees Celsius in January, 500 kilometres from the nearest city in every direction, with the highest recorded assault rate in the country, Tennant Creek occupies a position on this list that is, by the numbers, nearly its own category. And yet it is not number 1. Number 1, Mount Isa, Queensland. You were not expecting this. Tennant Creek has Australia's highest assault rate. Alice Springs has documented pervasive social breakdown and crime rates 4 to 5 times the national average. Darwin has crocodiles in its harbour, cyclone exposure, and the highest assault rate of any Australian capital city. All of those things are real and fully documented. Mount Isa ranks above all of them, and the reason has nothing to do with assault statistics. The danger in Mount Isa is invisible. You cannot see it, smell it, or feel it in real time. It does not announce itself. It accumulates in blood. it affects brain development, and it has been documented in government commissioned studies and peer reviewed research to be affecting children in this city of 18,000 people in remote northwest Queensland. Not in the 1970s, but recently enough that the monitoring is ongoing. The Mount Isa smelter, currently operated by Glencore, one of the world's largest mining companies, processes copper, lead, zinc, and silver at industrial scale. It is one of the most significant single site mining operations in the world. Lead is a core component of the ore being processed. Lead particulate and dust are produced as part of the smelting process and dispersed into the surrounding environment. In 2008, Queensland Health commissioned a study of blood lead levels in Mount Isa children. The results were disturbing. 11% of the 400 children tested had blood lead levels above the then current safety threshold. A separate pilot study published in peer-reviewed literature in 2017 found 40% of children tested had levels at or above the internationally recognised level of concern. With Indigenous children disproportionately affected, their geometric mean blood lead level more than double that of non-Indigenous children in the same sample. Lead exposure in children has no safe level, according to updated medical consensus. Its effects are neurological, irreversible, and silent. Reduced cognitive function, impaired executive processing, behavioural impacts that do not produce obvious symptoms detectable without blood testing. A child with elevated blood lead levels looks and behaves normally while the damage accumulates. The subsequent years produced what contamination disputes in extractive industries routinely produce: contested methodology, company-funded alternative analyses, government-commissioned follow-up studies, ongoing monitoring programs, and a situation in which the smelter continued operating while the monitoring continued and the community continued living adjacent to it. The monitoring has not stopped. The smelter has not stopped. The children are still being tested. This is not a historical event with a resolution. The smelter is operational. Mount Isa exists as a community around it because the economic activity it generates is the foundation of the regional economy. Let copper, lead, zinc, and silver extracted here represent genuine national economic value. The wages are real, significant, and the reason families relocate to a city that is 900 kilometres from Townsville by road and 1,500 kilometres from Brisbane. The financial reasoning is sound. The schools function. The community is tight in the way that isolated resource communities consistently are. The crime data adds to the picture. Queensland police records show offence rates substantially above state averages. Assault rates are elevated. Property crime is significant. These numbers place Mount Isa alongside regional Queensland cities with serious documented crime challenges. The heat is genuinely extreme. Summer maxima of 45 degrees Celsius are not unusual. The isolation means that a medical emergency requiring specialist intervention involves a flight. The cyclone risk is indirect but real. Severe systems affecting the region produce flooding and infrastructure disruption that a geographically isolated city has limited capacity to rapidly recover from. But the lead is the specific reason Mount Isa is number one on this list, because here is the distinction that separates it from everything above. Every other city in this ranking presents dangers that can, at some level, be identified and responded to individually. Crocodiles, visible, managed, avoidable with knowledge. Box jellyfish, seasonal, with closed beaches and warning signage. Crime, concentrated geographically and temporally, mitigable through suburb selection and behavioural choices. Extreme heat, preferable for, at minimum, escapable from. Even the air quality in Port Hedland is a hazard that adult workers can knowingly accept or decline. The lead particulate in the bloodstream of a child growing up in Mount Isa is not a risk the child can assess or choose about. The parents who move there for the wages are making a rational financial decision in the absence of information presented to them with the same prominence as the salary package. The neurological damage is happening at the developmental stage where it is most consequential and most permanent, and it requires a blood test to detect. It leaves no visible trace, no immediate symptom, no warning that can be acted upon in real time. Every other entry on this list will frighten you in a way you can immediately process. Mount Isa should frighten you in a different way entirely, the way that invisible, ongoing, documented harm to children that continues while it is monitored and discussed and disputed should frighten anyone paying attention. Every city on this list has residents who love it, who would challenge every word above, and who have built genuine lives in genuinely difficult places. The numbers are documented and public. The question that follows from them, why so many of these cities are places the people with the most choices consistently choose to leave, is one that no tourism brochure has ever attempted to answer.